morning. Can you all hear me okay? I'll put a note in the chat. Okay, I'm not seeing any answers there, so hopefully you can hear me. Can you see the chat? All right, well, I've started the recording, so let's go ahead and get started. The table of contents says that we are going to cover the following topics: gathering materials, setting up for success, writing a good research question, practical strategies for staying on track, and tips for before you begin writing, which are very important to know before you really get into the dissertation writing. And some information on easy citations. I use the APA manual 7th edition spiral bound, so I'm just going to talk a little about citations, and if you use a different version, the section numbers will be the same. I don't know what your university uses, so we'll just go with what I know. Okay? So, first of all, the focus of a dissertation is to contribute something new to your field of study. This webinar assumes you've already identified your topic in general, the context you want to study, but you may not have defined a research question yet or written a proposal. First, you do not need to have everything worked out right up front. The proposal will be fairly substantial depending on your university requirements. Some schools may want as little as a couple of pages, and others may want the first, really some solid information on the first 3 chapters. But the dissertation is an evolving process nevertheless. So this webinar will include sections on getting started in terms of your support structure, your schedule, and then we'll talk about developing a research question, organizing strategies, chunking strategies, and an overview of each chapter, that part you might already know, so I'll just go through that quickly. I'll briefly provide tips for staying on track, and then we'll talk about crucial writing guidelines that you need to know before you get started. We'll conclude with a section on citations, as I mentioned, and some essential pointers in that context. Before we go any further, though, I want to tell you about a little story called 6 Frogs on a Log. So there's 6 frogs sitting on a log, and they all just having a chat, and they're deciding that they're going to go across the pond to a group of lily pads that they think they might be able to really snag some good flies, some good breakfast over there. So 3 of the frogs decide that they're going to jump in the water and head on over there. The question is, how many are left on the log? 6 frogs are sitting there having a conversation, and 3 decided to jump off. The answer is there's still 6 frogs on a log. So just because you decide to do something doesn't mean you're actually going to go ahead and do it. So the intent is good, but you have to knuckle down and sit down and do the work. Okay, and all the information talked about here is provided in one of the handouts. So, let's go to the first section, gathering materials. When you get started, before you get started, some of the first things you should do is revisit your statement of purpose. Is everybody in here hearing me and everything? Looks like everything's enabled. Okay, let's see. Revisit your statement of purpose. When you first joined your degree program, you probably had to write an essay regarding your plans for after college. So right now, before you get started, is a good time to go ahead and go back to your statement of purpose and revisit what you were thinking when you first were excited about getting into your doctoral program or your master's program. Keep that vision in mind. Get a copy of your university thesis manual or thesis guidelines or any other instructions or tips that your school has available for dissertation work. Find out who at the university is there to support you if you have questions, and create a folder that has all these links and contact information. Then connect with your university library to identify databases available. You will definitely have access to several different databases, probably like EBSCO, and you'll want to search the ProQuest thesis and dissertation database for papers on your topic written by other students to identify interesting models that you might use in designing your own study. And we'll talk a little more about that. Find out what the IRB or ethics or ethical review process is at your school and how long it takes. If you're thinking at all about working with human subjects, you are going to have to go through the IRB approval before you can start asking questions of anybody. Some schools can return an IRB approval in a couple weeks, and others might take a couple months. So sometimes it's built into your class structure, and in some schools the dissertation process is far more independent and self-guided. So it's good to just have an idea of what approvals are going to be needed and how long it takes to get them. Reverse engineer your timeline to graduation. This I'm putting in a handout because, as I said, some schools will have chapter courses that take you through the process, and other schools have an more open process. Maybe they expect you to take 2 years or 3 years or a year and a half, whatever it is, and you have 3 semesters or 4 semesters that are fairly open to your process. So if you have an open process, reverse engineer your timeline to graduation. You might need extensions. That's very normal. That's why universities have the possibility of giving you extensions. So don't worry too much about that. Okay? Then very important, you'll create a schedule for a study 20 hours a week. And we'll talk about this in more detail. You should be talking to your family and friends and your employer about your objectives and your commitment in a doctoral program. I know you probably did at the start of the program, but this is another good time to do it right now during the dissertation process, because it really takes focus and commitment. And then you'll outfit your happy place for study. Okay, so realize that you are walking along a well-worn path on a guided tour. You have your committee and other support groups to guide you. You aren't going it alone. You should ask them for help. Never be shy. Ask for what you need. If you get stuck, reach out. At the same time, your committee will constantly be asking you probing questions. They expect you to listen to their advice and make the changes in your paper that they suggest, or defend your reason for not doing so. This is one of the major complaints committees have, is that students don't integrate their advice, and in the next draft, it's just not there. So be professional and step up and either defend why you did not agree with their suggestion, or make the suggestions and make the changes that they suggested. So your committee members' names are attached to your project too when you graduate. So realize that when you graduate, you will be their peer. So they have a vested interest in this. So the next section is on setting yourself up for success. Did you know that about 50% of all doctoral students drop out before completing their degrees? This is why these webinars exist. This has been going on for over 50 years in the United States. The dropout rate isn't a reflection of a student's intellect or their GPA or their effort or motivation. It has to do with juggling school and family responsibilities, finances, and social isolation usually. Getting support, especially while in the Albert dissertation phase, is really important. So don't let yourself fall into that trap of being the 50% that don't make it to the end. And we will talk about how to avoid that. And you may want to revisit this webinar about halfway through the process if you find you're getting stuck. So importantly, as I mentioned, seek out mentors, guides, advisors, librarians, editors, other students. Keep getting feedback, ask for it, keep yourself motivated, keep yourself engaged in conversations. This is your journey. If you get bored with reading, I mean, not everybody selects reading as their primary learning style. You can take a week off to attend a relevant conference or a webinar, watch YouTube lectures by experts on your topic, write summaries of what you've learned. And this can be part of the literature review, and definitely will inform your study probably in multiple contexts. It's legitimate material. So if your school doesn't create a structure to support you and motivate you, you have to be aware that you need to create this structure yourself. So I and my students encountered a lot of different things. This slide looks like it kind of got a little wonky. You realize that, like I said, it'll take longer than your university suggests to finish your dissertation in many cases, especially if you're a working professional attending part-time. You may need an extension. I did. Stuff happens in life, and I hope it's all good stuff when it happens to you, but my students have had promotions and they've had failures and they've had illnesses and other issues as shown here. 4 of the things on this list happened to just one student, but he got his degree. So who will support you during times of stress and transition? We should prepare for that now. The most successful students do speak with their family and employer and friends about their objectives and their need for time and support during dissertation writing. If your degree is relevant to your work, then this could be helpful to your employer. What you learn will improve your skills and abilities to contribute professionally. So it may be worth having that conversation with your direct supervisor that you may not always be able to flex a shift, and you may not always be able to do as much overtime. But the schedule we're going to develop will give you a lot of free time. So let's check that out. First, successful students do create a schedule that provides a work-life balance or a life-work balance. You need uninterrupted blocks of time for study, a total of 20 hours weekly. Each block of time should be a minimum of 2.5 to 4 hours, and you will tell everyone that you're unavailable at those times, just as though you were on campus taking a class with your phone turned off, except in emergencies. You can have emergency call-throughs. If you are taking these classes on campus, then still turn your phone off, okay? This means you aren't home. If you're working at home in a home office or a space, you aren't home. It's just like you're in class on campus. No one should be knocking at your door. So how to create a schedule that really works? Well, I do not recommend studying 15 minutes a day like others do. The first question I think you should ask yourself is, when is your best time to focus? In the early mornings or in the late evenings? Schedule blocks of time, 3 to 4 mornings or evenings each week. Say you commit to Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday from 7 o'clock in the evening until 11 o'clock in the evening. Then you have Saturday from 8 to 12, 4 hours in the morning. That gives you Tuesday and Friday evenings free for leisurely dinners, a movie, taking out the trash, and you have most of the weekend, Saturday noon through Sunday dinner, to be with family and friends. So that means you have time to relax every single weekend. And if you have kids, let them plan an outing twice a month. If you have a spouse or a significant other in your life, let them plan a date night once a week, so you don't have to think about it. That way they feel they're a priority and you can just go with the flow. Tell your friends you can stay out late only on Saturday nights, and that's something to look forward to. So this is about having a life-work balance. And of course you can flex in emergencies, or if something awesome comes up, or if something urgent comes up at work, just be sure to make up the time. You can work late in a crunch on Tuesday evening if needed, or you can flip your days because it is your schedule after all. You can switch Saturday and Sunday morning work for spiritual pursuits or go to the farmer's market if you like. It's up to you. But this is how you create a schedule that will work. So here are some questions to ask yourself right now. Now that you know when you're going to study, you want to prepare yourself. If you study in the mornings, get ready for work first, so you don't have to rush if you get caught up in reading and writing. Make the coffee, brush the cat, be ready to go. If you study at night, change into your pajamas or sweats before starting to study. Take out the trash and do the dishes first. Next, think about where you're going to study. Everybody thinks they have this information already, but until you reflect as a professional on how to do something, it's not really instinctive. So where are you going to study? Do you like your workspace lit brightly, or do you like it darker? You may want to change light bulbs. Like, I should probably change the light bulbs in here. Does the sun reflect off your screen in the morning? My room, the sun does. That's why I have a shade back here. So you may need to get shades or curtains. Do you prefer the room warm or cool? I have a space heater in here for the winter. Do you like music? Do you like quiet? Do you like to have sweets on your desk to snack on in the evening if you want to study in the evening? Or if you're in the studying in the morning, do you want orange juice and toast and marmalade before you settle at your desk every morning? These are things that you should give yourself permission to have as you set up your workspace. Be comfortable in your workspace in every way so you can focus. Take breaks. Get up and stretch for 5 minutes every hour. Everybody recommends that, but for me, it's better if I just get up when I need to, because I'm not watching the clock to see what the time is unless I have to be somewhere. The point is, again, give yourself permission to be completely comfortable. So the next section, we will talk about developing a good research question. Okay, I'm assuming you have an idea of your research topic and maybe even a research question that you want to refine. When you think like a researcher, you're focused on a research question rather than a research topic. The primary question should be only one question. This will help the research be very specific and very narrow. So don't ask two things in one sentence. This question will help you avoid irrelevant minutiae and focus on core assumptions and arguments as you explore the various literature. It's your anchor. It will help you extract relevant core arguments and assumptions from each person you interviewed too, if you're doing interviews or focus groups, and from each research, study, article, or book that you read. The question itself should be sufficiently narrow so that you can accomplish your inquiry in a short time frame. You may have 2 to 3 sub-questions to explore too. So I want to talk about how to design a good research question. The 5 W's, who, what, where, when, and why, pretty much work for this. A person, an organization, a demographic group like children or elders or farmers could be the who. An event like a brain concussion or Mardi Gras or a UFO sighting or a theory or discovery, an election or a series of events could be your what, or a trend, a social trend. If you're doing action research, then there is particular community context where a country, region, town, other defined geographic space, or maybe online classrooms like K-12 classrooms or in theaters. It just depends on your topic. When a time span of any type and era, such as the modern era, Victorian era, 2010 to 2020, or during the COVID pandemic or the 1918 flu, why, and justify your choices in all these contexts. A brief description of the significance of this topic and each of these contexts will be needed to introduce your research questions. So to go from a topic to a research question, you state your general topic, in this case, concussions. How does a concussion affect the brain? It's a broad question. Narrow then further, how do repeated concussions affect the long-term health of athletes? Narrowing even more, how do repeated concussions over 4 years affect the long-term mental health of football players? Now, you narrow it even more than that. How do repeated concussions over 4 years affect the long-term mental health of college football players at my university within 5 to 10 years of graduation? Now you've narrowed the question so much that you can see that this is something you can really focus on in answering this question. So sub-questions and keywords for search will come up also as you narrow your research question. What type of concussion are you talking about if you want to be specific? What are the effects, the impacts, results, consequences in the short term or long term? These are things you can be sub-questions, and they can also be keywords to search on. Do you want to do a comparison like NFL players versus college football players or any other sport? So this helps you frame your research. So I've provided a handout to save some time during this webinar. It includes an interactive exercise and a more detailed example of developing a research question. The content includes an interactive exercise from SUNY about judging the quality and feasibility of a research question, and a great chart from the University of California at Merced Library showing instructor comments on a topic to research question development matrix. So both are quick and easy and informative, so be sure and review that handout. Your research question may become fine-tuned, narrowed, or broadened as you begin reading too. Until you're done with chapter 2, you may not have a final research question. You may be encouraged to identify a gap in the literature where you will conduct your field study to contribute new knowledge. You may end up with more specific question or a slightly different question than you initially began with, but by the time you finish chapter 2, the question should become final, unless then something happens during your field research to change the nature. And of course, you'll work through that with your committee if something unexpected happens. This did happen to one student of mine during her study. She ended up having to change the research question and approach from participatory action research to action research partway through her her field study because a sponsor withdrew. So things can happen like that. So practical strategies for organizing your thoughts and getting started on writing. One of the first things I like to recommend to students to read is this brief paper, which is included in the handouts, the 7 Lessons for Qualitative Research. This handout is only 15 pages and is super helpful as a preparatory overview. That's all I'm going to say about it right now, so be sure and read it. One more very important tip. Whenever you retrieve articles or information from the web, be sure to write down the retrieval date. The APA manual, section 916, doesn't always require the retrieval date anymore in your reference list, but some universities do. So you'll have to check this out with your thesis guide. But it's better to have more information than not enough information when you get to the end. So just keeping track of these retrieval dates is a good idea when you're starting out. Also, some web pages are not static, so information can change. If you want to use the information that you find and it's no longer available later, you have to cite a date as to when you retrieved it. So again, check your thesis guide, read the instructions in the APA or whatever style manual you use. I always create a very complete reference list right from the beginning with as much information as I possibly can about every article. Download everything I find into folders, and if I download a document by an author, I I file it in a folder by the first author's last name, and then the date, and a little bit of the title, because you may end up finding more than one piece by a specific author that you like, and the dates and the bit of the title will help those be searchable for you later if you want to go back and review the original article that you read. Okay, not only to revisit what you wrote in the past, but to finalize your reference list. So file these documents by the author's last name and the date, and a little bit of the title information. The next thing I recommend to students is to contact your university library, which is what I said in the beginning. Find out what databases you have access to, including ProQuest. You can particularly want access to ProQuest because when you look at studies completed by other students in your field, those are considered peer review articles because the doctoral committee signed off on them. So not only is this a good way to find a few sources you can cite in your own study, but you can find ideas for your own method and approach and investigative process and see how other students justified their choices, why they rejected other approaches, and some of the resources they used in that context. Like who they cited is somebody you may want to cite if you like what they wrote, and look through their reference list for ideas on authors and articles you may want to read. Links are very often provided these days in the newer material. So the other student papers also provide a model for how to organize your paper, how to write about bias and trustworthiness and other forms of credibility, how to justify your method and related activities, and how to present your findings objectively. So you can find models there that you can use for developing and implementing your own study. So the next strategy I want to talk about is chunking strategy. This is an outline which helps deconstruct the large task of dissertation writing by dividing your thoughts into edible bites. So the title or subtitle and subtitle should be relevant to your topic and research question. You want to be really precise, as I showed you earlier with narrowing your research question. You want to be really precise with your title as well. You aren't writing a book, so it doesn't need to be an exciting title. This is the biggest thing that I see with students is they want to make it, oh, so exciting. But you might even revise the title at the end of your study to be more precise once you've completed it. Like when you're writing your abstract, it will at the end. The title should use common language and no acronyms, and think about your key terms. You want this to be searchable. So the purpose of the study, a couple of paragraphs to justify the purpose if you're doing this outline. The key search terms, as I mentioned, a glossary of definitions. This is important. You will want concise definitions to anchor your exploratory thoughts and frame the research question across multiple disciplines. If you're looking at food security, for example, how do you define it? What do you mean when you say changing from what to what? If someone was searching for your paper, what key terms could they use? And the definitions, I want to say one more thing about definitions. You should cite key authors' definitions. Whatever resonates with you will be the definition that you use for specific terms like food security throughout your paper. And you might find a better one as you go along, but this is really important to inform readers of your parameters and also to guide you during the process. So relevance and originality, that will be a section on the significance of your paper, and you need to justify the reason for doing it. Context and background, 3 to 5 paragraphs or so. We already talked about the time frame and location and population, so this is where you have your context and your background for the study. The proposed research method. You will want to look in your textbooks and cite the definition for the research method that you're using and justify your choice. And again, this can be where another student's paper comes in handy. You can see how they justified their choice in the method. A theoretical approach. What theories are you operating within that relate to your choices? For example, in participatory or action research, you may use theories of advocacy and empowerment. Okay, so the theoretical approach that you're taking. Proposed research activities such as interviews and focus groups, observations, surveys, polls, Delphi panel. Think about how you will analyze the data while you are considering what kind of data you want to collect. And then key texts to start with, key authors that you already know of or interest to you for the literature review, maybe 5 or 10, including your textbooks. Start your reference list right away. Okay. Then for your chapters, we'll just go over these quickly. Chapter 1 is usually the introduction. After you complete your outline and have the big picture in mind, you'll start writing in chapters. I've seen dissertations that are 150 pages or that are 400 pages. So it just depends on what's important to you in your focused area of study. It may help to have an overview of what each chapter looks like. Just for preliminary planning purposes, your university will probably have some material on this that you can acquire. But basically, chapter 1 is where you explain the problem, its history and background, the context you're working in, and maybe more depending on your university and committee suggestions. Identify a framework, the parameters of your study, and you'll want to talk about the limitations of the study, the assumptions and delimitations. And you should define those using your research methods textbook and write about each of those. That's required in dissertation work. The second chapter is a literature review. Think of this as writing a patent. In order to obtain a patent, you need to research all the prior existing designs and demonstrate to the Patent and Trademark Office in the United States that you have done so and that your product contributes something different. The key in a literature review is to research all prior existing information on your topic and demonstrate that your research question wasn't sufficiently answered in the past. Demonstrate there's a gap in the literature, or you have a hypothesis and demonstrate that your study will add to existing knowledge. Plan to be very thorough in your literature review in each area before you move on. Avoid irrelevant minutiae and tangents, and focus on the core assumptions and arguments relevant to your research question. Seek commonalities and differences in the perspectives in the literature. So in order to cover all this ground, one of the things you can look for is meta-analysis. Those synthesize a lot of literature. For example, an author may have looked at 400 papers on your topic with a population very similar to your own, and you can cite this expert with great credibility. You can actually do a search for meta-analysis on your topic on Google and bring up books and articles that are meta-analyses or meta-studies. Try out a variety of keywords and combinations of words in your searches and identify a range of resources and studies that contribute data and perspectives and viewpoints. Chat is disabled. Oh, how come chat is disabled? Okay, let's see. It says enable chat panel. Enable public chat, maybe? Is that the one? Can you chat now? Can you talk to me now? That work? Enable. Aha! Yay! I'm so sorry. I was wondering where everybody was. Apparently, this is, there's 2 different chat buttons. Yay! Ah, thank you. Thank you for contacting Alana. She got the message to me. Okay, let's see. Okay. Just letting Alana know that we're in now. Thanks so much, Annaline. Okay, let's see, where was I? On searching for resources and meta-analyses. Okay, try out a variety of keywords and combinations of words in your searches. If you're studying cooperatives, for example, you can compare a variety of types or focus on just one? Thank you, Annalene. Yeah, I was wondering. Sometimes people register for the webinar and then they don't really pay attention. They just kind of let it go in the background. So, but there's quite a lot of people here, and I was kind of surprised I hadn't heard from anybody. Anyway, feel free to post your questions. You may want to identify certain disciplines. This is another searching for resources. You may want to identify certain disciplines that could have literature applicable to your study. So you can explore your topic from different perspectives, like management, psychology, sociology, economics, political science. We actually presented a webinar on beginning and expanding the literature review. So you can look for further insights on that when you get to the point of starting your literature review. And I will put the link on the slide at the end of this webinar. So chapter 3 is the method. The first part is usually theoretical. You choose and justify your approach based on traditional forms of inquiry, which you can find in your textbooks. You then talk about how you want to design your study, including the population or the industries, the cultures affected, what activities you'll undertake, such as interviews, focus groups, surveys, and justify why you chose this population and why you chose this way of collecting data. Then you'll discuss how your study design assures accuracy, credibility, and trustworthiness, and where there's potential for bias. You might be more familiar with terms like validity, reliability, and generalizability, but in qualitative research, those terms are not really used so much as credibility and trustworthiness and dependability. And my kitty is here meowing, and maybe you can hear her. Anyway, we will present our research on 13 ways to, a webinar on 13 ways to ensure trustworthiness in qualitative research next Tuesday at this time. So you can watch for that invitation or just register for it so you have the recording when you get there. The handouts in that webinar also include articles that you can cite in your own study, like 4 articles. Importantly, this chapter method later on will be modified. You'll go back after you write what you plan to do, then you go back and rewrite exactly what you did, add in the information of exactly how this panned out step by step in the field, and provide examples from what actually occurred. Chapter 4, data. This chapter usually includes a discussion of what data was collected and how, and a presentation of the findings, and any analysis you conduct, like coding and sorting information. Some schools do it a little differently, but in any case, this is a completely neutral, objective revelation and presentation of information gathered during your study. You compare and you contrast and you integrate, but you don't try and develop any meaning related to your problem or your research question. This isn't the time for discussion. We also have webinars on planning ahead to analyze data. So before you get to chapter 3 or during chapter 3, you might want to see that one. And on interview design, recruiting, and pilot tests. And those links are, again, provided on the last slide. So that can help you when you get to that point. So chapter 5 is your conclusions. This is where you present your analysis of what findings mean to your study and your research question in particular. How did the findings answer your research question or not? It's okay if you don't find the answers that you sought. Your effort has still generated valuable insights. How does your analysis relate to the literature, to theory? What step, like for example, when I was talking about before, empowerment and advocacy as being approaches, well, in chapter 5, you'll talk about whether you were able to empower or increase advocacy for the subject, if that's relevant to your study. What steps do you believe could be taken to improve your study? You discuss this. How was it limited and how is it significant? It's discussed again here in the conclusions. Redefined as they occurred. What would you recommend be done about the problem topic now that you've done the research based on your analysis of the findings? What would you recommend future researchers investigate to take this further? And what does this mean for your community of practice? And then last, you have either a bibliography or reference list, which again, it depends on what your university wants you to put in there or what your committee wants. A reference list is a list of all of the material that you cited in your study. A bibliography includes that plus all the material that you've reviewed, whether you cited it or not. And then you have the appendices after that. And that includes extraneous material that doesn't really need to be in your study, but you do want to reference it. So section 5 here is about staying on track. So you have deadlines. No one begins a dissertation or thesis without having a passion for their study. Curiosity guides us, so we're likely to go off on tangents in multiple contexts, and you can avoid this. You have deadlines set by your university and your doctoral committee. You have a research question or a hypothesis to guide you, so don't go off on tangents. If you find something tangential that really fascinates you, start a folder called Further Reading and put those articles and things in there, and maybe you will go back to them later if they end up seeming more relevant, and maybe you'll just save them for after you've completed your doctorate. And feel free to delete material that doesn't seem truly relevant. Like if you're reading an article and it's really cool and you start to write about it in your lit review, and then you're thinking, well, this really isn't it, but I just wrote an entire page and a half, just delete it, copy it, and paste it into another piece of paper and set it aside in that folder for the future. Maybe after you get your doctorate, you will write an article using that material. So it's all useful. You've studied it, you've identified it. Just set it aside if it doesn't really focus on your research question. Keeping your schedule to 20 hours a week, even if you have to flex the days or nights that you study. I know it seems like a lot, but the 20 hours a week will guarantee that you will get through your dissertation. Recognize that life will throw you curveballs. Revisit your statement of purpose and talk to your support groups, whether they include family, friends, other students, coworkers, faculty, advisors, editors, or a therapist. You never know. Some pretty traumatic things have happened to my students and to me when I was doing my dissertation too. So it's not out of the question that you might really want to talk to a professional. That can happen. So before you start writing, there's some things you need to know. Be sure to eliminate inappropriate phrasing. And this can mean something like slang or acronyms, colloquial phrasing. If it's a term that's used in a culture, or if it's used in a geographical location that's not common elsewhere in the world, perhaps, that can be something that you use, but you define, okay? I'm trying to think of one a student of mine used. It was something to do with a farmer's market, but it was a different word for it in her locality. So she had to explain what that was because the word was not really common knowledge to everyone everywhere. In any case, if you wrote something previously, if you wrote an article already, or if you wrote a paper, even for one of your classes, cite your own work properly. Your own work may not be peer-reviewed, but if it's relevant to your research question and helps express your opinion really well, then it may be something that's okay to put in there. You know, like when I was studying this, and I wrote, and I still feel that way. I still feel that's important. So cite properly right from the start and note your retrieval dates. An editor can take out extra information at the end when you have your paper professionally edited, but they can't add missing information like page numbers. So be very careful to add as much information as possible. Also, you don't want to have to go back if you're adding something to what you wrote before, and you want to make sure the context is correct. You don't want to think, where did I read that? You want to know exactly and be able to find it really easily. So this is for you. Try not to speculate or conjecture or express hypothetical opinions. If you do express your opinions, as I mentioned, take credit for them clearly. Make sure to differentiate between what an author discusses and your own opinion. And this is a little exercise for you right now. Take a minute and look at this paragraph. I see 3 things wrong with this paragraph. Can you find them? Okay. First, which part paraphrases Smith et al. 2017 and which part paraphrases Smith and Jones in 2014? The part I put in red in the middle, you can't tell who said what in that part. So it's best to start a sentence with the author's information so readers can tell where one person's thought begins and another ends, including your own thoughts. And this is very important. This was actually taken from a student's paper. You also need page numbers when you're paraphrasing. If you're using APA, it requires page numbers for paraphrasing someone else's idea. Also, parenthetical citations, Smith and Jones, the and is written with an ampersand, not with the word and. When you're writing in a narrative, then you can write Smith and Jones and put 2014 in parentheses and continue on the sentence. Here's a word I never knew until I started writing a dissertation. Anthropomorphism. I talk about this word in almost all my webinars. It means the attribution of human motivation, characteristics, or behavior to artifacts, animals, and natural phenomena. For example, a report includes information displayed on a piece of paper in the slideshow or described in a news broadcast. The report doesn't state anything. It's inanimate. The author of the report is the source. He or she or they provided information being discussed. So rather than saying the report said or the study concluded, which isn't too bad, but you would write something like this, is shown here. Johnson stated or reported or concluded. So past tense is another theme that's useful, or tense in general is something you should know up front. Rather than writing the past 10 years or the next 10 years, be precise, because someone reading your work 5 or 10 years from now would otherwise guess an incorrect time span. So write out the actual dates when you're talking about like a meta-analysis. Jones read 400 papers between 1982 and 2012, okay? Not 400 papers spanning the 30 years ago, okay? APA allows past or present perfect tense in writing. Whatever you've read as of today was written in the past. And some doctoral committees will expect you to write your paper in present tense, like I will do this. I am planning to do that. But then go back at the end and change it all to past tense. You know, I have done this or I did that. I kind of like to try and put everything in past tense to start with, or present perfect, but this may be something you need to negotiate with your doctoral committee. But in the end, it ends up being past or present perfect tense, okay? So while you're writing, you want to be able to add breadth and depth. As new authors, you read and add insights into what you wrote previously. I'm saying this wrong. As you read about new authors, you will add their insights into what you wrote previously. And whether they agree or disagree with something you wrote previously, you can go back and just add their names parenthetically in a citation, or you can add their ideas or quote from them as pertinent to your discussion. And again, be careful to distinguish between who said what. Now, if you generalize and say some researchers think that food banks are part of the problem, then you have to cite some researchers. You can't just cite one. And if you think, I think I have some good examples here. So if you're talking about a group of people who seem to have a variety of perspectives, then you need to list people or authors from those groups of people there. Okay. So the next section, and I think this is nearly the last section, maybe, citations. I want to talk a little bit about citations. Citations are evidence used to create a strong argument in support of a position. And the credibility of your evidence is extremely important. Representing an idea as your own, or even summarizing or paraphrasing without citing an author's name, is plagiarism. APA requires page numbers even for paraphrasing. So accurate citations are critical so that others can check your work against the original content. When they go into your reference list and maybe even randomly pick a paper that they're interested in, the committee can do this multiple times, then they need to be able to see that what you wrote is accurate. So dates and page numbers direct a reader to the precise source of information so they can check out the original source and look at the context. And you'll want to do this too multiple times as you're writing and rewriting your paper over months. You know, things will, you'll want to go back and say, okay, well, I'm adding this. Now, is this really accurate to what I said before? Okay, so do not imagine also when you get to the end that your editor can fix what isn't there. I mentioned this earlier. Only you have the books and articles. An editor can take out extra information, like if you have too many page numbers in there, or they can highlight them for you so you can take them out, which is preferable. But they cannot add in something that you completely forgot, like a page number. So I kind of said this already. This is my approach to page numbers. I like to insert page numbers in all citations, even though they're not always required, because you do rearrange and revise your work over many months or sometimes over a couple of years. And this enables you to review the original content to ensure you convey the information accurately and in the right context right up until your final draft. For example, you will take information from your literature review and you'll use it to support your method in chapter 3. And then you will also use it in your conclusions in chapter 5, like I talked about relating your conclusions back to theory that you discussed in chapter 2. You may find a new author and want to quote their contrasting opinion, so you need to go back and check the first author and make sure the context is correct. So again, I use page numbers throughout, and your chair, your committee, or supervisor or tutor, they may question this, but they should understand your purpose if you're going to do this, that you really need to be able to go back and quickly check your information and not waste time, you know, hunting for something. Again, do not let your editor remove extra page numbers. They should just highlight them for you to remove later if you want to. So what to cite? These are all the things that APA wants you to cite. A video timestamp, a page number, paragraph number, slide number, in all of these contexts. And if you're not sure how to cite something, it's better to include more information and be consistent throughout your paper than to be inconsistent. And I think you probably know this, but you cite in your reference list and in your paper as you write. You're developing your reference list as you write. So do these in tandem. Quotes, just a quick note here on quotes. They're handled in 2 different ways. A general quote has a period at the end of the sentence after the citation. A block quote is 40 words or more, starts on a new line, it's indented, and does not use quotation marks. The citation comes after the period at the end of the sentence. So you can see the difference here. And a list can be handled like a block quote. If you're a short bulleted list, then you're better off writing it in a paragraph form. But you should create bulleted lists where you have lots of items listed in a paragraph, or where each item is a longer phrase or a complete sentence. And a list is always followed by a period and then the citation with page numbers after the last period, just like a block quote, unless it's a list of your own thoughts or recommendations like in chapter 5. So quotes and lists always need page numbers, no exceptions, unless you're listing your own thoughts. Oh, and here we are at the end with a few minutes to spare for questions. The handouts, it's just a list here of the handouts I've provided, the sample exercises, reverse engineer timeline, 7 lessons for qualitative researchers that I recommend you read. There's a PDF of these slides, and I was going to give you this link. I was going to put it on the slide, but I didn't. How to conduct research online. I'm going to put this in the chat. There you go. This is a good link for getting started. Did I put it here? No, I did not. So, oops, there's the link. Anyway, and then the very last slide here is just relevant webinars that we are doing that might be useful to you as you write. Oh, there it is, how to conduct research online. Okay. So if you have any questions, now is the time. We've got about 5 minutes left. I knew there wouldn't be much time left. Let me know. Again, Adelina, I appreciate that you contacted Alana. She got a message to me. So we were good to go here. This one, 13 ways trustworthiness, that's next week. I don't think you're quite at the point where you need that yet, but welcome to attend. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions yet, but I'm going to hang out here for a few minutes longer, right up until an hour. If you think of something, you can go back through the slides or take a look at the handouts and see if you have any questions there on the handouts. You're welcome. That's great, Mary. 20-hour timeline. Yep, that works. Awesome. You're welcome, Fruce. These slides are also included in the handouts, so all these links are there. You're welcome, Evelyn. Great, Patrick. I'm glad it was really helpful. It's awesome. I really appreciate the feedback. Thank you. Oh, Leslie, first generation. Awesome. That's really great. Congratulations. You will definitely reach your master's using these processes. Leslie, that student I mentioned earlier that ended up having 4 of those incidents happen, that was during a master's degree. He had a lot of hurdles to overcome, a lot of challenges, but he really made it. Do I have any ideas on how to select an indigenous research method? I did read some material on that recently in Canada, First Nations, but I don't have any suggestions. I haven't worked on a study with the Indigenous, but I know that there's, if you look in Canadian literature and Canadian policy, including Indigenous is in the processes of researching is really important. Let's see if I can find the policy I'm thinking of. Just any tips on doing a meta-analysis, just in general. Annaline, doing a meta-analysis is a very long process for a student. Finding meta-analyses and using them in your study is a great way of covering a lot of material. But if you're going to do one, it could be a lengthy process. I would suggest definitely finding other ones and seeing what they did, and using them, one of them as a model, one that works for you. Look for meta-analyses in, like I said, on Google, on your topic or on keywords relevant to your topic, and see what's out there. And it's a lot of material to cover, but other people may have covered large chunks of it for you. And of course, your research question will hope that they fill a gap in between what others have done and what you're going to be doing. Let's see if I can find that. Let's see. Okay, regarding indigenous research methods, we never take the easy way. I know my dissertation was 400 pages, so I kind of went out there a bit too. I did a mixed method study. It was a lot, but I wanted to know, so I did it. And you can do it, I'm sure. So the indigenous question, what I had seen was this was in terms of food sovereignty, so I'm not sure what your topic is, but there were indigenous people in terms of, in that context, wanted it recognized that food is the gift of life, not to be squandered and cannot be commodified. There's this is not the information I was going to give you. It was on policy for research with indigenous groups. If I can't find it during this webinar, you can, let's see, you can contact me. Let me go back to the first slide. Has my email address at PD Education, and email me your question, and I will do some research on what I was thinking and try and get that to you. That might be a better way than trying to do it right now. And let's see, where is my email on these slides? There, no, it's not on there. Stephanie@pd.education. Okay, that is my email. Let me go right here. I'm pretty sure that's my email. Yes. Okay. So I hope that helps. I will look it up. If you email me, I can get back to you. Okay, if there's no more questions, then we're just after the hour, and I'm going to say farewell and the best of luck on your journey. And I hope all this was great in terms of setting yourself up for success. Let me stop the recording. Annaline, I did mixed methods for my master's, and although they say curiosity killed the cat, oh, where did your message go? I lost your message. Oh, anyway, Annaline, your message disappeared. Yes, curiosity killed the cat. It was a long work. It was a lot of work. Mixed methods. Okay, bye-bye, everyone.